And it's really my pleasure here to introduce you all to Frank Piccininni, our collaborator at, he is, maybe you want to introduce yourself, Frank. Would you do that? Just because it's...
Gladly. Yeah, so I'll just share, I'll just go into it in my first slide. I'll kind of talk about myself a little bit. Just making sure you all can see my screen here.
Yeah.
You can see the PowerPoint. Okay. Yeah. So thanks so much everybody for taking the time out. We used to like to do these lunch and learns, but now it's just learn, I guess. And lunch is on you. But so as Hilder said, my name is Frank Piccininni. I'm the co-founder of Simple Consulting, a professional services organization. We work with environmental not-for-profits. We do expert work. We work, on grant writing for not-for-profits, and we work with real estate developers to ensure, certain real estate developers anyway, to ensure that development proceeds in a sustainable and conscientious manner. About a year ago or so, we incepted Spadefoot Design and Construction. We realized there's a lot of really talented design professionals, including Tony's company, D&B. Give them a little bit of a plug. On the islands, but there seemed to be a bit of a dearth of experienced contractors that actually can implement a design plan. So Spadefoot Design and Construction was, envisioned just to really just be the install arm of Simple Consulting, and it's been a great passion to kind of build and develop, because I like getting dirty, is really what it amounts to. So and spring is coming. Just to kind of begin my presentation, it may not sort of feel like it with all the snow outside. You can see this little thing poking up on the right is skunk cabbage, and I took that picture at the Science Museum of Long Island. And it's one of these first plants that break the snow. It actually has thermogenic properties. I'm really excited for an exciting growing season. We have a lot of great things planned, with Spadefoot and through the collaboration with Science Museum of Long Island. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to kind of talk about some of these things. So I'll just sort of dive right into the presentation. So what's there? The museum grounds are incredible, in my opinion. It's really somewhat of a developed area. There's not a lot of habitat, but this is just there's a really beautiful, intact, upland habitat, and on your left you can see it. It's harder to appreciate leaf off. You have some beech trees that are mid to late successional species. You have some tulip poplars that I can't even I do tend to hug trees, and I can't get my arms around some of the trees at the museum. So some beautiful specimen trees and really robust habitat. And to your right, there's actually a fox den that Hilder, Matt, who I think is on the call, yeah, I see him right here, and I found on the property in this beautiful upland habitat that really is surprisingly intact. And that habitat, it does a really good job in stabilizing the hillside that kind of forms the contours of the stream that runs through the property. With American beech in particular, and a lot of the other oaks and such that grow in the area, they have really dense and fibrous networks of roots, and they sort of graft together and are really holding this bank into place. So what I've learned very quickly as a biology student, and then during my field research, is that a wetland without a healthy surrounding terrestrial environment is largely just a puddle. So here at the museum, you not only have the wet area, which is relatively intact, but you have this beautiful surrounding upland habitat. So it's gorgeous. With proper adieu, of course, to the wetland area too. Again, I have that skunk cabbage, which gets its name, by the way, because it is kind of stinky. And that stink actually attracts pollinators, interestingly, and it's a pretty important food source for some of our local bees and stuff early in the spring. But yeah, so we have this beautiful wetlands habitat. You have this riparian area, and then you have adjacent fishless wetlands. So I personally think we haven't confirmed any presence, but I really think it's pretty prime amphibian breeding habitat too, because it's got water during this time of the year. And there's no fish in it, and then you have the breeding habitat, and it's directly adjacent to the upland summer home range. So it's a really exciting place. I think that, you know, the more time we spend there, the more we'll learn about it. And I'm really, again, just grateful for the opportunity to sort of to spend time there. And that's, you know, it's what I really love to do is ecosystem restoration. And there's a couple of little bullet points I wanted to talk about. So what is ecosystem restoration? Well, ecosystem restoration means different things in different places. In the context of the Science Museum, the first thing that I think we're going to talk about is addition by subtraction, right? So you take out these invasive plants. It's pretty incredible to me, the ecological memory that any land has. Even a suburban lawn, you know, you yank out the turf grass and you start to see some of the seed bank coming in, and of course some of the native invasive plants will start to come back in sort of opportunistically when you remove any sort of vegetation. But if you continue to monitor and edit the land, just by removing invasive plants alone, you're greatly increasing the ecological health of the environment. In addition to that, where appropriate, remedial planting. And we'll go into some examples of what we want to do at the Science Museum, and we'll be doing in March about why you would plant where and why and how, sort of. And I wanted to bring up adaptive management. Adaptive management is really the science that I like to think that Spadefoot design and construction is sort of based on. So it's really this iterative process where you do an experimental manipulation, such as removing invasive species, and then you rigorously monitor the effect of the intervention, and then you adjust your work and your process over time. The more you learn, you know, there's two different types of adaptive management, like at least as far as the scientific theory goes. There's passive adaptive management, where learning is a very beneficial consequence and unintended or not of just learning by doing. And then there's active adaptive management, where there's actually rigorous monitoring protocols set out, and you know, testing, modeling, and then the iterative changes that you make to your land management plan is based on very specific science and rigor. So what I'm talking about today is more on the bucket of passive adaptive management. But we do have, and maybe for another presentation, we do have some active adaptive management that we're planning for the site too. So it's pretty exciting stuff. So what do we want to subtract? So what are the threats? So here, and admittedly, it's not as impressive. Here's Japanese knotweed. It's a really aggressive invasive species, and here it's starting to take hold at the base of the hill. Gosh, I'm missing a slide. The other thing I wanted to highlight, of course, is Leeds Pond at the bottom of the hill, where the wetland runs into. Another beautiful habitat. We'll talk about that. But so what are the threats to the habitat? Is Japanese knotweed. And so I have here ecological damage. It's pretty clear. The stuff spreads aggressively. It completely decimates forest regeneration. And it's very shallow rooted, so it doesn't do much from a stormwater standpoint. And I have a bullet point here: English property values. It's invasive in England too. It's Japanese. And interestingly, it's caused a bit of a mortgage crisis, believe it or not. It has decreased property values, and a lot of commercial lenders will have refused to issue loans, believe it or not, for properties that have infestations of Japanese knotweed. So, you know, if that tells you right there that not only is it ecological, but it's, you know, this stuff is pretty pernicious, and it's really hard to get rid of. But I have another bullet point here: bang for the buck. So there's not a ton of it at the Science Museum, and it's probably a lot for Matt to do on a volunteer basis. You know, Matt's out there. I see him hacking away at some of the English ivy and somewhat, but to the extent that we can get rid of this, it's a really important thing I think we should kind of look into, because A, it's not a ton of work, and B, it has the potential to really start to invade this beautiful forested riparian area very quickly. So, you know, we should look at that. So that's one of the threats: Japanese knotweed. The other threat is common reed, or the Phragmites. And I have a bullet point here: no, it's not native. And a lot of folks, and I might be to a certain extent preaching to the choir here, but a lot of folks think that this is just a native plant. It's so ubiquitous on Long Island, really everywhere you look. where there's water anyway, or fresh water, you have some extent of Phragmites. So a lot of people's minds are blown that to find out, oh, that's not a native breed. No, it's from Australia. And interestingly, you can't unsee it. So you're welcome. You're going to see this stuff everywhere. Now that you know that's invasive, you're going to say rats. There's more of that Phragmites. But it's here, I think, largely because it's taking over an otherwise unoccupied niche. So prior to our human development of Long Island and beyond, really you had these forested uplands and forested wetlands that were adjacent to streams in this riparian habitat. Instead, now what we do is we tend to we like to have an unobstructed view of a waterway, particularly ponds, which are also man-made in and of themselves. But because we're taking away a lot of the forest cover that would otherwise exist adjacent to these water bodies, it's kind of leaving a prime habitat for Phragmites to exist. Because, and I say prime habitat because it's not very shady and it's wet. So, to the extent that you can shade out Phragmites, that is what we're looking to do March 20th. A gracious donation from Long Island natives of black willow, as well as some red maple, which Spadefoot Design and Construction will be providing, as a donation to the Science Museum, because I think it's necessary. So between these donations, we're going to be planting along the banks of the pond in a hope to crowd out some of the Phragmites via shade. And I just wanted to show you, this is actually a job I was looking at yesterday. And it really is pretty telling. So you're going to go around and see Phragmites everywhere. But what you'll start to notice too, and you'll see this everywhere, if you look on the picture on the right, there's Phragmites, excuse me, everywhere on the site. And you look at the picture, the picture on the left, the Phragmites is clear. I mean, and basically it's all the same habitat. Whereas on the right, you see kind of a blank spot where the Phragmites is not growing. And above that, that blank spot is a tree. And obviously it's leaf off right now, but it actually is pretty, I think, demonstrative. The fact that, in the spot where there's shade for the vast majority of the year, or at least during the growing season, there's no Phragmites. The Phragmites cannot survive in the shade. They're shade intolerant. And they're also highly dependent on big nutrient loads from runoff associated with nitrogen associated with stormwater runoff. So you plant trees and it takes down the amount of stormwater runoff and allows the Phragmites to get shaded out over time. So we'll watch this happen by planting some willows and red maple along the banks of Leeds Pond. Another threat, English ivy. And gosh, this stuff is everywhere on the museum. I guess it was probably planted. And so, Matt has been doing a great job, and other volunteers, and kind of trying to hack back some of the stuff off the trees. And it's going to take a lot of muscle over time to get back the trees. But really the priority ought to be clipping the vines at the base of the trees. So at least it doesn't kill your trees. So I have some practical points that I wanted to kind of talk about English ivy, less so as from the Science Museum perspective, but more so about everybody's, everybody who has English ivy in their yard. So one, it's not well behaved. So I hear this a lot from clients, from people who participate in Facebook groups and stuff. Well, I like English ivy because it stays put on my land. That might be true, other than the fact that it has berries, and the berries are eaten by the birds. The birds fly off, poop in the woods, and now there's English ivy coming from your yard going into the woods. So that's why it should be a priority, I think, to clip the vines off the trees. One, at least don't let it kill your trees, as I suggested here on the third bullet point. And two, it tends to only have berries. Most of the berry proliferation is when it goes vertical up the tree. So if we prevent it from going vertical, you save the trees and you reduce the prevalence of berries. And it's also, I wanted to mention too, as compared to native tree species, English ivy doesn't really do a whole lot from a erosion and sediment control standpoint. The roots are sort of shallow, and really the tree root grafting is really what holds most hillsides in place. Of course, English ivy is better than bare soil in terms of reducing erosion and transport of sediment. But but it does not have near the effect of having trees on the lawn. I'm sorry, on a hillside. And I hear a lot of folks say, you know, on their forested hillside that's getting overrun with English ivy. Well, I don't want to lose the English ivy because then we'll have all this erosion. It's just not the case. Get rid of the stuff. I hate it. I don't know why it's still sold at box stores and you know, local garden centers, but don't buy it and try to pull it over time is my recommendation. You know, you'll be doing a world of benefits for the Science Museum and other properties like it. And then this is the beast. And it's somewhat, it's sleeping right now, but it's kudzu. This is the vine that ate the South, and it's pretty. There's an acre of the stuff on the museum property. I've never really seen anything like it, or roughly an acre, at least on Long Island, and it's unbelievable how this stuff, how quickly it just overwhelms beautiful established oaks and poplars and just rips them down like they're nothing. It's a pretty pernicious plant. And the fun part about this is that, you know, I walk through these sites and say, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to deal with this? This is so much plant material. This looks so tough. Like, who's going to do this? And then I bring my machine operators in and they say things like, oh, you know, maybe a week's time. What are you doing for disposal? You know, and the awesome power of machinery is, when used in the right way, is really encouraging. So I think, you know, so I have a stable of subcontractors who I get to work with, and I'm so grateful for their help. And what they always comment is, you know, I love working for you, Frank, because we get to come and restore ecological structure and function when I work for you. Usually I have my excavator and my bulldozer and I'm destroying the environment. So there's a lot of excited people waiting to tear this stuff down. And what we want to replace it with is a coastal oak beech forest, which is what probably should be here, or a lot of the species, you know, are here actually on the other less impacted side of the environment. So you know, I think we called for something like 1,000 trees in the acre being replaced over time. Some of them would be bare root, some of them will be, and most of them would be 2-gallon specimens. But I really hope that we get the opportunity to do this. And I write monitoring maintenance. It's not going to be a one and done. We don't use herbicides in our company. It's just not us. If you want somebody to spray poison, you know, there are a lot of other organizations that will do it. We won't. We want to rip it out with an excavator, and this requires hopefully a grant. So we'll have to, you know, put a ... and cross our fingers that we can get funded on this one. But you know, this is a beast of a plant, and I really want to rip this stuff out. I'm really excited to, truthfully. You know, and then we could switch, you know, hats to, you know, take off my Spadefoot hat. I'm also the co-director of the American Chestnut Foundation. And what we really want to do is establish a mother orchard at the Science Museum. So, you know, just to back up a little bit, for those of you who don't know, American chestnut was once one of the most dominant plants across all of eastern forests and in the Appalachia area and points north. It was prolific. It was an important food crop for animals. There was actually pollinators that were specifically associated with American chestnut. And then, you know, this is sort of a familiar story. We brought over Chinese chestnuts from China, and with it came a blight, a fungus, an airborne fungus that completely decimates these plants. And what you see on the left is a living chestnut tree. Actually, this exists at the old Bethpage Restoration. And on the right is a canker. What happens is the blight actually, you know, will infect the plant, and it develops these what they call the cankers, and it breaches the circulatory system of the plant. So the picture on the right is the canker. So there's a xylem and a phloem, which is basically, you know, how trees move water up and down from the roots to the plants. And these cankers start to interrupt the xylem and the phloem and cut off the circulatory system. And eventually the canker spreads around the entire trunk of the tree and kills it. It girdles it is the term. So basically, you know, cuts it off. You know, the leaves can't store carbohydrates in the roots, and the roots can't send up water through the evapotranspiration process to the leaves. So it's a pretty cruddy thing. and now they're functionally extinct. It went from the most dominant species across the eastern seaboard to really vestigial populations. You have what happens basically is you have these, it lives in the root system, and the root system will, the plants die back, they get girdled by the chestnut blight, the trunks fall over, and then the roots will send up a little sucker. That sucker will live to about 30 years or so, and then grow up, get infected with the blight, fall over, and maybe produce some nuts in the process. But you have these really, it's been relegated to the understory, and doesn't exist in a lot of our eastern forests anymore because of the chestnut blight. So it's really thought to be functionally extinct. So the American Chestnut Foundation has been trying forever, probably like 30, 40 years, I forget exactly when they started, to do what they call the backcross hybrid. So what they were trying to do is that, the Chinese chestnut has some blight resistance to it, or a lot of blight resistance, right? Because it co-evolves with that pathogen. So what they were trying to do is crossbreed the American chestnuts with the Chinese chestnuts to keep it genetically, genotypically American chestnut, but with some of the Chinese chestnut genome, so that they become blight resistant. And what they found out, really the hard way after 30 something whatever plus years of research, is that when they are successful in creating trees that are blight resistant, they're more Chinese chestnut than American chestnut. So in terms of like large scale revegetation, it's sort of suspect whether or not you want to put Chinese American chestnut hybrids out into the woods. So they've been trying, they continue to try to do the backcross hybrid technique, but I actually put more stock in the genetic engineering. So the SUNY ESF, the School of Environmental Science and Forestry, has developed a transgenic chestnut. So basically what they did is took one wheat gene and stuck it into the genome of the American chestnut. So you would get, 99 point whatever percent of the genome genotypes, and 100% of the phenotype, which is the genetic, how it's functionally displayed as far as an actual tree, is American chestnut. And it just has this wheat gene stuck into it that makes it blight resistant. So it's really exciting. So they've been very successful. They have, huge orchards of this stuff up in Syracuse, and they actually have to go as far as bagging all the flowers and collecting all the nuts, because they're not allowed to distribute the pollen yet, because it's being reviewed by the Food and Drug Administration, the EPA, and various other administrative agencies. Probably Forest Service. I think that it's a multi-agency review. And when they get the approval to release this transgenic chestnut, we want to be set up here on Long Island in order to really take advantage. So that's the point of these mother orchards. So on the left, you actually see a view from a canopy, and on the right, you see like a tree ladder that is installed in the old Bethpage restoration tree. Truthfully, I'm not nearly brave enough to climb up this ladder. My co-director, Nico, I have to give a lot of props to, has been running around hand pollinating these vestigial populations of American chestnuts and collecting Long Island wild type chestnuts, which is pretty incredible. So what we're doing is establishing what we could refer to as mother orchards all around Long Island. So we're establishing Long Island wild type chestnuts, which will grow up. If you plant in full sun, unlike plants in the forest, if you plant sort of in the middle of the fields where that old maple used to stand on the, for example, on the Science Museum ground, they start to produce flower and produce nut, around age 5 to 7, believe it or not. So by then we'll have a couple other mother orchards kind of going into production. We have about 10 of them that are planted across Long Island, and I think the Science Museum will be the 11th. And what we'll do is we'll crossbreed the Long Island wild type chestnuts with the Syracuse transgenic chestnut tree. So the offspring, 50% of them will be blight resistant, as well as having at least 50% of the genes from Long Island wild chestnut. So the idea is to have these orchards so that we're not just going across Long Island and planting Syracuse variety American chestnuts. We're going to be crossbreeding with a local Long Island wild type, so that we can have local wild chestnuts that have blight resistance. And then we can go off, I always laugh, I say Johnny Chestnut seed, and go out and revegetate all of Long Island and hopefully restore this beautiful tree to its former ubiquity. It's a pretty audacious goal, but I think it's obtainable with a lot of concerted efforts from groups like Rewild and Transition, Port Washington, and the efforts of the Science Museum. So that's really it. I wanted to keep it brief and sort of conversational. So I'm happy to kind of take questions and talk about some of the exciting things that we have going on.
Well, Frank, I want to thank you on behalf of the board of SMLI. And for those of you here who don't know me, my name is Hildur, and I am president of the board. And I really want to thank you for your generosity, first in time and sharing your expertise, and also donation in terms of plants and project ideas. So it's really a privilege and exciting to have you here. This is our first project meeting here, and I'm excited to see so many of our board members, and Max Goldman, one of my favorite tree friends. He's here. He's actually, Max, do you want to say hi? You're up there. I have to give you permission to unmute yourself. But before we start the Q&A, because I'm sure many people want to sort of chip in and ask questions right now, would you share with us a collaborative agreement that we did? Do you have a slide with the because we have a wonderful way, if anybody's interested in working with Frank, we are going to be, I could also share that in a PDF file with the group.
I have it, if you bear with me for just a second.
If you could pull that up. And I want to acknowledge Transition Town, Port Washington is here, Rewild, Long Island. So you have also Cornell Cooperative and Native Greenways. And am I forgetting someone? And our wonderful staff is here as well. So there is a lot of support for these projects. But first, we want to support you in your work as well. So maybe you want to speak to this.
Thanks. So this was sort of an idea, a way to kind of further give back to the environment, to the science museum's efforts and so on. So the idea is that, Spadefoot Design and Construction, we do offer consulting for homeowners, and we do the installs as well for homeowners. But what I was really wanted to do is basically first offer a discount to anybody, who's a member of the Science Museum or gets referred by the Science Museum on the amount of services. And we offer two distinct products, really. It's a detailed pricing model to really help you back into what budget you're comfortable with. So it's not just a plant list, but multiple models in terms of how much to spend on a given area. So it's really a detailed consultation, as well as a 3D rendering. Basically we take pictures of your yard and superimpose the pictures of the plants on your yard. So you get an idea of the design aesthetic. And if you want to DIY it, you have an idea of what to place where. And what we want to do is not just, so there's a cost for this. So we usually charge $400 for each of those things. We're offering it at half price, and all of that money is going to be donated back to the museum. And that and that money is going to be earmarked to pursue some of this work at the museum. So it's just a way, if you're interested in I sort of alluded to along, rip up the English ivy, plant natives in your own yard. To the extent that you're interested in, a consultation, you don't have to pay me, donate to the museum, and it'll go double. So that's sort of the idea, just another creative way to give back to the organization that I think is doing such a wonderful job.
It's really, we're so pleased to have you here, and soon we'll be roasting chestnuts on an open fire.
I hope.
So let's open up the floor and in good order, raising electronic hands. And we have Hoosh. I see Hoosh's hand raised here. So please unmute yourself and let's start the conversation.
Hi, Frank. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. It's nice to finally see you.
Yeah, likewise.
I was just hoping you could speak more to the adaptive management, the passive adaptive management. What sort of timeline are we looking at for that? Like, how often do we recheck what we did and how it affected it before we reassess? And
so that I kind of emphasize the passive part because it's a little bit loose, right? Like it's really do something, watch how it works, and then adjust over time. So there's no real so there's rough, loose guidelines about what adaptive management really means, but it's again, I mean, so it means different things in different places. So I think that what we should probably be looking at in terms of, like, for example, the willows and the maples taking down the Phragmites prevalence, really after one growing season, we should start to see some semblance. And what I really hope is that, we have some excited folks that can come and clip the seed heads of the Phragmites in the fall before it goes to seed. So it's really as you need it and as the project requires. So we should be around hiking every 6 months trying to figure out how it works. It'll probably, in order to really beat back the frag without actually any physical removal, which would of course require a wetlands permit. We're just doing the planting. We're probably gonna have to wait to see that the canopy sort of knits together, which is why we're planting so many plants in such a small area and using black willows because they like wet feet and they grow really quickly. And it's a native. And by the way, a big pollinator, I know this wasn't your question, but a big pollinator favorite, black willows, is a host plant for, something like 400 something species, according to the National Wildlife Federation. So I meandered a bit, but I hope I answered your question.
No, absolutely. That's great to know. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, wonderful. And we have dates for planting. So anyone interested in joining the planting efforts can email us. Kristen, perhaps you want to share in the chat the email info@smli.org to join the volunteer corps. We'll need plenty of able hands, and thankfully we have so many people here today who know what they're doing. So that's really a privilege. And we have Alicia. Here we go. I'm going to unmute you.
Hi.
Hi.
Yay. Thank you everyone so much. I was thinking if you guys will be monitoring around 6 months or maybe less, whatever is needed, I would be happy to be on your crew and photograph everything.
Well, that's so generous of you. March 20th is the planting date. So I'll look forward to seeing you there because I'll be there with my little kiddo and my wife.
And we have a professional artist on board. Wonderful. Thank you, Alicia Grant. And I know Max is going to join us this summer. I don't know if Max is still on. He was here.
I'm not sure if I'll be there over the summer. There's a potential. The
potential, yes.
A potential.
Tell us where you are now and what you did last summer.
I'm currently at Cornell, and I worked at the museum last summer as a counselor.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And he had a tree rescue project. He's very modest.
Oh yes, I did have a tree. Yes,
how many trees did you? Project. Yes, yeah.
Unfortunately, not as many trees as I had wanted to collect, but I have a decent number of trees that need a home. So I guess if you guys need trees, which it sounds like you might, there are a few. I have a few that are fairly decent sized, some silver maple, one silver maple, some black walnuts, a white pine, and some others.
Well, there's a lot of places that they would make a good home. So if you're, you can bring them on March 20th or get them to us and we'll get them in the ground and give them a good home.
Sweet.
I should mention, Max, and for you or any of your peers, and I hope this is okay, Hildur, Spadefoot Design and Construction in conjunction with Long Island Natives is offering a internship, either a combination of paid internship or for school credit, depending on the student's particulars. And you'll be working with Spadefoot Design and Construction on restoration projects. You'll be working with Simple Consulting in conjunction with a lot of environmental not-for-profits on more professional services corporation, and you'll be working some days at the farm. And part of the internship is a self-directed sort of research component, mentored. So, if you're interested, Max, it's on our website. I can send it to you specifically, or anybody else who might know of a young student who's interested in an internship. We're looking for somebody good.
Well, Max is just most excellent. So it's a pleasure I'm so glad you found the time in your schedule to join us, Max. And the floor is open for any questions, thoughts, or comments from the audience?
I think Tony's waving without the.
Oh, not with the electronic hands. Let me put gallery
see.
view. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Frank, I admire what you're trying to do. You're trying to push a big rock up the hill. Trees are great for stormwater. They're great for shade to keep the environment cool. But for stormwater, they provide a tremendous amount of precipitation storage, what's called leaf storage. Okay, and that attenuates the peak flow runoff to the bays and the ponds. However, it seems like the big competitor of trees are lawns. And lawns, as you know, are the major culprit in terms of fertilizer, pesticides, and the loss of soils through erosion. What do you find, given that America, and including here on Long Island, there's a love affair with lawns, green lawns, steep lawns, lawns where they really don't belong. And to some degree, we're guilty of that at the Science Museum. We have a very large lawn on a steep slope, not 15% slope, but a pretty significant slope. What do you find with homeowners? We know that the utility companies don't want trees around along their routes, and public works departments would prefer to have smaller trees, and homeowners want those lawns.
Yeah. So Tony, I mean, your point is well taken, and just for everybody's benefit, I mean, so as compared to trees, lawns, I view lawns on the continuum from old growth forest to concrete. Lawns are somewhere closer to concrete than forest, and especially in the winter, this time of year. So you're spot on. In terms of rolling the rock up the hill, I get tired, but I have a lot of helping hands. Is really kind of what I sort of. It's really putting one foot in front of the other, having these webinars, educating people about how important it is to really do some restoration. And I think that folks are great, and there's a lot of folks in the native plant, sort of herbaceous and even shrub layers, kind of talking about restoration, removing lawns and creating meadows. But your point about trees are well taken. It's unfortunate that a lot of times when people move into a new house, the first thing they do is take down the trees. It boggles my mind. And really, for me, it's about education, in the sense that the reason why there's so many issues with trees falling on people's houses and so on is because we plant these token trees. We have one tree in the middle of a lawn. And what happens is the canopy of the tree doesn't cooperate. They're not well behaved. They overgrow the canopy because there's very little competition for light. And then there's no below ground grafting of the root systems of these trees. So what I have recommended to a lot of my clients, and they've listened for the most part, is to plant in clusters. So when I plant, I don't do I'm sort of the anti-landscaper. I don't do rows of trees or one tree in the middle. I plant in clusters of threes. And if you have room for one tree, you have room for three, is sort of my viewpoint. And that really will protect the built infrastructure from trees falling down, because trees like to be together. They don't need this big canopy, and they actually not only share physical support, but they share nutrients through the mycorrhizal network under the ground. So so Tony, it's really about helping people to understand that trees are your friend, and if you do it intelligently, you're not going to have an issue. Don't plant any more of those darn Norway maples, which are giant weeds that pop up and fall apart all over the place. I hope that answers your question. It's sort of it's an uphill battle, but we'll continue to do these things to educate people.
It's terrific. I like this, talking about we like each other's company. A person doesn't do well alone, neither do the trees. So we have Kathy Gaffney is here, and next Pat Valenti, if we go in order of hands.
Hi, this is Kathy Gaffney. I was wondering, what do you do with the Japanese knotweed weed? What's your removal strategy for that?
Elbow grease. So you know, I tend to just go at it with a mattock, or if it's a big enough area, a mattock is like it's sort of like a pickaxe, but it has like sort of a flat end to it. Or if it's a bigger area, you could bring in equipment and, you know, just scrape it. But then the key really is to keep coming back over and over again and ripping it out. And I think over time, you know, if you leave a little bit of a root, it'll re-stem off that root. But over time, you'll starve the roots by getting rid of the above ground, you know, infrastructure, and it'll die back if you're diligent enough. I have read somewhere, and candidly have not used this technique. I've read if you can put like chicken wire out, you know, rolled over you know, you take out the knotweed and then roll over chicken wire over it. What the knotweed will grow back up past this chicken wire, and over time will girdle itself, not unlike the cankers on the American chestnut. So the knotweed roots will keep sending up shoots. The shoots will get kind of choked out by the chicken wire, and over time the roots will die. But really, it's just, in any case, it's persistence is the way to get rid of the knotweed.
So while you're doing that, you really don't want to plant other stuff there, or you want to leave that area? We have a small area adjacent to the Manor Haven Preserve that I was looking at. We should probably do something before it spreads.
Yeah, do something now, and I always say replant, and then you edit around what you plant. And the one trick to that is to plant things that you could identify, or at least the people who are going to come back and do the follow-up maintenance work can identify. So that, you know, that's really the important part, is to, you know, because what happens is, and it's happened on some of my projects where we did an invasive removal and then we planted a bunch of herbs, and then, you know, I got a call from the client who said, you know, my landscaper said he could do the maintenance for me, but they ripped out all my native plants. Can you please come in and replant and do the maintenance for us? So it's about having somebody with plant knowledge to be there and make sure you're not ripping out the things that you plant.
Yes, and
shrubs would be better.
Sorry?
Some shrubs rather than herbaceous plants, would that be better?
Probably, because it's more, you know, and to my knowledge, just based on it, and I'd have to look up the USDA website. My understanding is that knotweed is also shade intolerant, and it would make sense based on what I observed. You don't really see it in the deep forest as much. You know, it can get in there along riparian areas, but I think that's because there's the light intrusion because of the actual physical space that's occupied by the stream. So shrubs and trees will be less. There'll be less to make a mistake on when things are coming back up this time of year, or at least in a couple weeks. And it also might actually reduce its prevalence to a certain extent by shading it out, sort of like what we're talking about with the Phragmites.
yes, and I'm pleased to introduce you to Patricia Valenti, who is the founder of Native Greenways and also a board member at SMLI. And she has planted the most amazing native tree. What do we call it? A grove? It's a forest. So Pat, will you unmute yourself? Here we go.
Okay, I actually have two questions.
Sure.
One of them has to do, and this is something else that's near to my heart, because I also had the tree board in Manor Haven, and it's that Devil Strip area.
Yeah.
And what we found is happening, and nobody wants to legislate against native plants, but people are just going crazy in their Devil Strips. And as a result, it's unsightly, and we're getting complaints.
Yeah.
And so I don't know whether it's just education, but are you aware of any community that's been able to actually promote the planting of natives like creeping phlox into these areas, but make it known that, you know, you just can't go wild with it and plant anything you can find? And that's what people are doing now.
Yeah.
They're just going crazy.
So on the one hand, and maybe I'll answer this and then I'm happy to take the other question. You know, on the one hand, you want to encourage people to kind of take,
right.
You know, stuff into their own hand and not discourage them from planting, but also you have to be careful that it doesn't look crazy, because, you know, to you or I, it might look beautiful. Oh my God, look at that Joe Pye weed. I can't wait for that to bloom. You know, that seaside goldenrod's going to look great. I see Marshall's background on the corner over here. But, you know, to others, it's like, oh, why are they letting their lawns, you know, why aren't these people mowing their lawns? And so it's really about, I think really that you have to kind of thread the needle to not discourage people, but maybe give them the education and understand. You said phlox, it's a great one because it spreads kind of low and it creeps. And it has these beautiful, pretty flowers, and it's a pollinator favorite. So you know, I guess it's less about discouraging and more about encouraging them to pick the right plants and not just do things haphazardly.
Yeah, and I want to stop short of saying that you have to get an approval to plant in a devil strip, but it's rapidly getting to that point where, you know, it's, excuse me, but, and we're not talking lawns, we're talking that area that's really a common area.
Well, I see. Yeah, there's a lot of you know, folks out there. They you know, they focus on meadows and to the untrained eye, the plant blind eye, it looks a little bit messy. And that's part of the reason why I like working with these forest species, because if you really if you can restore a forest, you know, you think about it in a healthy intact forest. I showed the picture of the upland habitat. You know, it's not. The herbaceous layer is not really very well occupied. There are some spring ephemerals and stuff, but it's really, you know, these beautiful trees, and you look down and you can walk through without worrying about ticks. So it's really about the right plant choice.
Right.
That's, you know, I seen, and just for Carol Brown, I just saw it pop up. What's a devil strip? Basically that area, or I've heard it referred to as the hell strip, the area between the sidewalk and the street, where it's just, you know, traditionally just a patch of lawn. A lot of folks are just ripping out the lawn with a sod cutter or a mattock or something and planting, you know, whatever they get from the Limpy Fair. And then they have like a goldenrod, which I love, but, you know, gets to be, you know, 3 feet high, and it's flopping over onto the sidewalk, and it kind of gives a black eye to the restoration cause. So, you know, I think the answer really is education, and you know, and maybe that's my canned answer to everything, but that's sort of the truth, you know, plant choice and education.
Well, we support that at the Science Museum, education.
Yeah.
And environmental analyst David Yakim, he's all about education. I see your hand. I'm gonna
Can I get that second question?
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry, David.
Okay, the second question is once I'm trying to shade out my Phragmites, what exactly am I supposed to be doing with what I see that's still emerging? Is it just that I just keep cutting back on the Phragmites?
So it spreads 2 ways, as you likely know.
Right.
You know, so by seed and by runner.
Yes.
The runner stuff will you know, become less and less prevalent as time goes on, as the canopy sort of knits together. But the seed can potentially spread it a little bit further, and, you know, maybe the seed floats away and puts another problem area. So my suggestion, and what I hope to do with the Science Museum, is to plant, and then every fall, you know, before it starts to drop its seed, just nip the seed heads off and you know, bag them and trash them.
Okay. Thank you.
That's the recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Great. Hi there. Thank you. Wonderful work. I'm really excited that you're doing this and the whole community is participating. I wanted to ask you, I've got just a couple questions. Sure. First one is the area with the kudzu. What are you planning to replant it with? And also, are you going to be managing the Norway maples as well as the English ivy around the kudzu? The other questions that I had were, if you could tell me whether or not you're going to release the location of the fox den for their protection, or if you can assess maybe their habitat is far enough out of sight and view where people won't be, kids won't be crawling in there to, you know, get a better look like me, and then also you mentioned salamanders, and I was wondering if you or if there's a study that's been done aware of any other species of particular conservation concern.
So the first question was Norway maple. So basically what we're going to do is have
the kudzu, remove the kudzu, and then Norway maples around that, and how is that going to all fit together?
Yeah. So yeah, I've given a lot of thought to this in terms of the area that's, it's, I sort of joke that it's on that side of is the Museum of Invasive Species over there.
That's
So
true.
it really is kudzu that's kind of overwhelming what effectively is a Norway maple forest. There are some, I think I noticed a tulip poplar in there, and there was some, walnuts and some other beautiful trees, but for the most part, it's Norway maple. And so within the spatial extent of the kudzu removal, assuming we get the grant and I get chosen as the contractor, we're going to go in there with like a 10 or 20 ton excavator and just knock everything down, pile up the Norway maple, and part of the proposal was, follow-up maintenance visits, and we'll be there, cutting off the sucker growth of the Norway maples over time to starve the roots. So yeah, we're going to try to really address everything within the spatial extent of that kudzu, massacre that's happening right now. But of course, that whole area is sort of infested with Norway maples. So there's two challenges there. One, just the enormous scale of the project and the funding it would take to kind of fund a total clear cut. And two, the fact that if it gets any bigger, it might open you up to some other permitting requirements, including maybe even an EIS, which would kind of be the death knell of the project. So we're going to handle it within the spatial extent of the area, and also but I think in terms of outside that spatial extent, at least at this initial project phase, we're going to kind of ignore the Norway maple. We are, however, going to go in and take out as much of the burning bush in the understory as we can. So over time, what I really hope is that if we get rid of the burning bush, at least in the immediate vicinity surrounding the area, you'll have some natural forest regeneration. The blue jays will eat the acorns, fly it over, and over time, hopefully outcompete the Norway maple, because the oaks can exist for a really long time in the understory, as you likely know, David, based on what I know about your background. So but we're talking about the scale of 100 years or so, but that's the general gist. So that's Norway maple. Was that I can move on to the second part if that was is that an adequate answer?
I think that's amazing that you're considering taking on the whole entire hill, the entire north and north and west side of the forest.
Not to mention the English ivy. And holy moly, I've never seen English ivy being outcompete like that, which should sort of tell you something about the kudzu. That the English ivy is getting beaten back by this stuff. So yeah, we're taking on the whole thing. And when we replant, if you Google the New York State Natural Heritage, they have what they call, I think they call them community types.
Community types, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I was doing some research into that. I think we should talk more about it later. I was able to classify the forests in a few different ways.
Yeah, and interested in your classification. I didn't actually have the privilege of going on to the, I didn't even know that the intact side was there. So I might have tweaked the plant species slightly based on that, but there's a lot of overlap. So I'm comfortable. The community type that I suggested was the coastal oak beech forest. So you have a lot of things like chestnuts, not chestnuts, rather oaks, chestnut oaks. That's what I was thinking. White oaks, American beech, maybe pitch pine. I'm forgetting off the top of my head. And the understory is more things like, spice bush and winterberry and high bush blueberry, that type of forest. But it's predominantly going to be based on, we're really trying to establish the canopy, and we're really looking at the tree species.
There's a publication, actually, anyone who's interested might want to look at it. It's the Ecological Communities of New York State. And I think the forest fits into the white oak tulip tree characteristic forest.
I tend to agree. After seeing the other side, and we can tweak the plant choice. I'm not married to any particular list, and I have to, when we get the go, I'm gonna have to see what the availability is anyway. So maybe we throw some tulip poplars in, and again, there'll be a lot of species overlap anyway between the forest types. But David, I agree with your assessment. In retrospect.
And all that said, as you mentioned before, we have healthy grounds as well. So we may be the museum of spectacular invasive species, but then you go to the other side and you see what's worth saving. That's why we're doing this. And
It's the most wonderful example of a dichotomy right
yes,
there. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
and it's great for educational purposes, but the work that we will be doing is really a neighborly service to the community, because if we would allow the kudzu and the other invasives to spread, that wouldn't be good stewardship. So Marshall
Two
Brown.
others. Wait, hold on. Wait, there's two other questions from David. And I don't want to give him short shrift.
Well, yeah, we just will move quickly enough for Marshall and Carol to chip in after. Okay, good.
Fox Den, going upstream on the left on the hillside, you know, and I feel like I'm kindred spirits here, so I feel comfortable, you know, so you can't really miss it. It's by there's some holly up there.
But you are recorded, so let's keep this.
Oops.
Yes, no, we're not going to
This
tell
will
anyone.
be online. I'm all about the privacy. Right now, they're in a it's a very private time of year for the fox, so we want to leave them alone.
And herpetofauna was the other question, just briefly. Reptiles and amphibians, I guess most notably amphibians here. Actually, my graduate research, I was in a herpetology lab. So that's, you know, that's kind of my, you know, where I started in my biological research, and I learned plants after I learned salamanders. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are marbled salamanders here based on the habitat type and the availability of breeding habitat. Certainly spring beavers and you know, and almost certainly gray tree frogs. Marbled salamanders, if I'm not mistaken, are threatened, or at least a species of special concern in New York State. So I wouldn't be surprised if they had marbled and spotted, and tigers, probably not as much, but you know, who the heck knows? Like birds, salamanders, you know, show up in spots that they're not quote supposed to be. So
we'll have to get together, because I've mapped the salamander population on the peninsula. So we'll.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
David, we have a lot of follow-up conversations. I'm excited to have them. All right.
All right.
Hilder,
yes.
We have Marshall. Hey.
Yes.
Right. So I work with Frank, Marshall Brown. There's a tremendous educational opportunity here for what you're going to be planting, and all the people that come through. We're putting a descriptive sign in front of my yard here. Frank dropped about 2,000 native plants on less than half an acre, including 80 trees. So a stand of black willows and a stand of oaks. But people need to know, when they see it, they think it's beautiful. So I dropped this in the middle of a really boring suburban neighborhood. Cars slow down to take pictures, and they haven't even seen spring yet. So the more you can educate via living examples, and there you are at the museum, I'm sure. I mean, it's right along the path, Hilder, to the water where you're getting rid of the kudzu. That'll be tremendous. A little QR code on the sign so people could pop out and see what the plant list is, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So so to the, by the way, I was going to surprise that you know, thanks for ruining the surprise, Marshall. I was going to definitely, if we get the big grant, I'm going to find a way to get some awesome signage for the museum too. So, so that'll happen. But you heard it here first.
Yes, I think, and that said, that's one of my favorite things about Mannerhaven Preserve is the signage. That's excellent signage that goes along with the plantings for educational purposes. So we have Carol Brown checking in.
Hey, Carol.
So I apologize for being ignorant on what was called the Hells or Devil's Strip. I have Huntington and now in Southold for the past 45 years, and we don't have those. But I would like to refer you to Ithaca. My brother lives in Ithaca, and so many people are vegetating that strip with the most beautiful plantings, etc. And it's really it really enhances the neighborhood, because you've got, I mean, even their vegetables they're putting out there. But I wanted to make a comment or two. The South Fork is about 35 miles long and only 2 miles wide at its widest. And so we don't really have any pure ponds. We have all brackish and salt water. So trees replacing Phragmites with the trees that you had mentioned, the black willow and red maple, are not going to be available to us because of the saltwater conditions. Also, since I'm on the South Hope Conservation Advisory and we do a lot of review of wetland areas, be very careful with all the rules and regulations about cutting back the Phragmites. In my town, it's a 5-year process. With a permit, you're allowed to cut it down to no less than 18 inches per year. So very often it's that 5-year process, but also remembering that it is a monoculture that kills off everything else around it because of its rhizomes, et cetera, like you had mentioned. Instead, what we recommend along the edges of waterways to help reduce the amount of nitrogen that will flush into the water is native non-turf buffers. And I like to see them at least 15 feet. But I live in a town where I'm a minority. I always have to fight for that because people are afraid that they're going to lose their views. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And I've been on so many, I'm also the assistant coordinator of our Climate Smart Communities task force. It's a DEC initiative. And what I'm finding that everybody's talking about insofar as education is role models. If they see something beautiful like we just saw with Marshall's background, they're going to be inspired. No, my husband is a turf lover and I'm not. And every year I just take away, another 10
Yeah,
and make it, put in native perennials and native shrubs. And he thinks it's fabulous. So again, as you said, it's education.
Yeah. So can I comment to just a couple quick comments in terms of Phragmites doesn't grow in salt water actually. So it grows adjacent to salt water.
Yes.
When it's and really the reason why it can stay there despite tidal influences is because of the freshwater flow emanating from upland, the stormwater. So the areas where you have Phragmites in your town, even though I agree with you on a lot of tidal influence, the black willows will probably do just fine there. So keep that in mind. I'm also an environmental lawyer. You got to, by the way, I hadn't mentioned that. And I've dug in the regulations pretty deeply, and certainly there's state and local and actually federal considerations. If you're removing the Phragmites, just get it going at them with the matic, like I said, you probably need a permit under federal, state, and local law. In order just to clip the seed heads, though, there you would have to fall within what has been done in the past is having it fall within the general permit. There's like a permit that kind of covers a lot of activities, including things like cutting back the Phragmites. So there's a sort of a hack with the DEC that you might be able to get around. In terms of jurisdiction specific law, like the municipal law, that's really just that's a crapshoot depending where you are. So I'm sure you know more about that than I. So,
right. I'm just mentioning that in my area, if you want to cut back your Phragmites, it has to be specified in your application and
Sure.
and how you're going to do it. So since we get these regularly, if you come out our way, you'll know that you'll have to do that in order. Otherwise, DEC is going to come and slap a nice little, they're going to make you pay for it.
Yes, agreed.
Wonderful. Well, we've kept to the hour for the lunch meeting. Is there any burning desire? Anybody who has a comment, question, statement? I think we should wind down in the interest of time, knowing that this is the first of many conversations. And for the climate conscious, I just am delighted to share with you, I put in the chat a conversation that's a climate action series kicking off next week. If you want to sign up, it's in collaboration with landmark on Main Street. So because this is the first of many conversations on the grounds of SMLI, but the conversation is now being had in many different ways in terms of how to be resilient in this time of climate crisis. We cannot stop the changes, but we have to adapt to them. And how do we do that? It's the best metaphor I can think of is, you know, if your bathtub is running over, you're not going to just turn the faucet halfway, right? You're not going to you're going to stop it from flooding. And that it's not enough to say, you know, yeah, by 3:45 today, I'm going to turn it 75%. And then, you know, I'm going to go down to, you know, I'm talking about the missions. So what you're talking about, Frank, is of course, native plant gardening and removing invasives. And that ties right into climate conscious gardening that offers opportunity for drawdown, cleaning the air of carbon. And so what we want to be doing is getting rid of the chemical dependency of the lawn, and instead I would like to envision our grounds, not just the lawn, but healthy woodlands and wetlands there by the Leeds ponds. And there's so much we can do together. It's really a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for your time.
Could I just say, okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Peggy from Audubon, please.
Hi, Peggy.
Peggy is a president of North Shore Audubon and also a board member at SMLI. So I'm pleased to have you here, Peggy. She maintains the most beautiful wildflower meadows. She's like the founder of Healthy Grounds.
And I'm going to be doing the rain gardens and need people to volunteer. And I thought this was a good time to, we're going to need quite a few people sometime in the beginning of May to volunteer for planting.
Yes.
This is from the grant. So I thought this was a good audience to ask.
Wonderful.
And people, who should people contact, Hilda, if they can volunteer?
Kristen can speak to that. Kristen, do you want to say hi? Well, Kristen is our director of operations right now, and she will, do you want to maybe share your email address and how to get in contact?
I will share my email address, and anyone that wants to reach out about volunteering for the grant project, just reach out to me and we'll have an application and get things set up.
Yes.
I'm especially interested in people who want to plant, but which will be a one-day event, I think. But there are other ways you can volunteer.
I recommend emailing info@smli.org with a subject line volunteer, and we welcome able hands. And really, as you can hear from today, there are many wonderful projects worth supporting. And weeding is good for, you know, your physical and mental health. It's the most wonderful work we can do. That's how I met Peggy. I volunteered before I joined the board. I volunteered to weed with Audubon with Peggy there in the wildflower meadow. So that's what, great. You know, yeah. Any closing statements, Frank?
None other than I'm so grateful to just be in the room with all of these wonderful like-minded people, and for such an incredible opportunity to do something really special and for a special place. So thanks so much for everything and for this chat, and you know, here's to many more.